So I was visiting with some of you out there just a few minutes ago. They want to know if I was preaching. I said, I really don't like that word. So I kind of like Arnold's word, gospel proclamation. That way I don't have to take credit for it, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what that means. So this is kind of a quick turnaround on a sermon for me. And that's may be a good thing. We're going to see. Because I noticed that as I was preparing, I got easily distracted. And I wanted to find this particular word and what it meant. I couldn't find it. So you just have to hear my version of it, I guess. So to get around this subject of divorce, I decided to talk about marriage. But where Deb and I were going when we got the call was to my nephew's wedding in Oklahoma City. And it was at the First Nazarene Church. And if you've ever been to a Nazarene church, you know they are musical. And it was beautiful. The service, the ceremony, the music was beautiful. It just so happened my nephew was part of the Oklahoma State University choir while he was there. And there was about 50 of them there that sang during the ceremony. And it was gorgeous. It made you want to ask them, can you sing? Can you sing this song? Can you sing that song? And one of the soloists sang Ave Maria that would just peel the paint off the walls. It was magnificent. So, that's why I want to talk about marriage. So, in the text, Arnold said, it's the one about divorce. So when I get here this morning, but that's not the one he was talking about. It's the next scripture about a certain man. And I could have done that one too, but since how I put together this one on divorce, we just changed the program. So I mentioned Deb and I going to the wedding, and I think we like going to weddings because we see ourselves in the wedding. We kind of get to measure how we're doing as a couple. And various times we would look at one another and say, I love you. Or, that's us. Did you hear that? That's us. It tends to give us a whole new view on love and marriage. Now, the minister there during the officiating said we need to compare a contractual love and a covenantal love. I'd never thought about it that way. But he said that contractual love is if you do this, then I will do this. That's the contract. Now this contractual love is important in this scripture because that's what they had in those days. But the covenantal love was, I will love you always, regardless of what happens and who does it. I will love you. Marital love is about pouring ourselves out for the other. And I like to remind Deb that we do that. She and I do that in probably some of the most interesting conversations we get into are we're both trying to do the same thing for the other one. You ever had that experience? So we both wind up washing dishes, we both wind up cooking together because each of us is trying to do for the other. Now, the Pharisees are a group of scholars that claim they take the law of Moses literally. But over the years, they've added a few of their own laws. They've made it the way they want it. And they're all guys, so it's all to the benefit of the guys, right? So let's talk, they intentionally bait Christ. What do you say about it? This is a big issue at the time. So it's important to note in the culture at that time, there were 4 things that were really important to a Jewish family: their ancestors, their lands, their progeny, firstborn sons mostly, and their family God. Now, how do I explain that? Well, that's like maybe there's a little shrine, a little section in the wall in the house somewhere, and they have something sitting in it. It could be a hand carving of the family. It could, whatever is important to them. And I wondered, well, what do we have in our time that would illustrate that? And I thought of the family Bible with all the family tree in it that had been kept by great-grandmother, grandmother, mother, right on down. We've all seen those. So those were the things that were important. Now, I mentioned the contractual love. Well, the way this happened was that a family would find a spring in the desert, and they would camp there. And before long, another family would come along, and they would share the water. And that's how the community started to build. And for protection and for workers working the land together for survival, it would be important that they became a larger family. So they would arrange for the children to marry. And this tied the families together. So how complicated would it be out in the middle of nowhere if this marriage didn't work? So I tried to think about, well, what about in our day and time? Well, not necessarily our time, but certainly in the settling of this country, you can trace the beginnings of cities to the availability of water. And we enjoy going to Pagosa Springs. Well, the reason Pagosa Springs exists is because of the springs, the thermal springs. And that has grown up into a city. And that was for the medicinal value of the springs. So Christ's response to this is different than the way the words say, at least to me. It's different. He really comes down hard on them for their hardness of heart. You guys are not paying attention. That's what he's saying. And then he goes in to explain what marriage is about. Marriage is about, it was created male and female. And it is about being together in a shared, mutual interdependence, not dominance. Marriage is not patriarchal, that's what he's saying. Spouses cannot treat each other as property, but that's exactly what they were doing. Women didn't have a say in Israel and Judah at that time. They were just property. If I tried to do that at my house, you know, this makes me think about the women in my life. I don't know if you've noticed, I call Mary Frances Mom. And that's because I have known her all of my life. And she was always there with her patient kindness and give me the shot anyway ways. And I had a lot of women like that in my life. My aunts, mostly the ones that married into my wild family, they were all really sweet ladies. For those of you who knew Inez Calmes, she was one of them. And so I just try to count up all those women in my life that were so much my teachers, my mothers. And there was no way I would talk back to them about anything. That just wasn't done. I tell people when we get in conversations, you know, I got a switching every day, and I earned every one of them. But one of them that I'd never got a switching for was respect for my elders. So I've kind of gotten off the track here, haven't I? So I want to call your attention to something. We're talking about a dynamic here, and we just did a sermon on it recently about this same dynamic. And it was the Samaritan woman at the well. And do you remember what was said there? I'll remind you a little bit. He said, go to town and get your husband and come back. She said, I'm not married. He said, you're right, you're not. There was no judgment there. He was talking to a woman in a country that wasn't even recognized as such by Judah. Now there's more to this. If you'll pay close attention, it wasn't about race. It wasn't about gender. It wasn't about rich or poor. It wasn't about power or powerlessness. It was just one human being talking to another. Now, if we want to talk about race, we're all members of the same race. The human race. Now I'm starting to preach. Christ did not come to judge the world. He came to establish a new covenant. He was overturning all of those, I really step out here, archaic ways of living. This isn't the way to do it. We're trying to do a new thing here. You know, in today's world, it's sad to say that in a lot of locations, marriage is the same way as depicted here. Think about Pakistan, India, the Middle East. I read recently that India just rescinded a law that prevented the husband from being punished because he treated his wife bad. That's no longer a law in India. Eddie's sitting over here laughing. He already knew that. Even in our country, there are expectations in a marriage. However, Christ's view and message in these scriptures that we're talking about today is lifelong mutuality and interdependence. And one of the things that I really enjoy about Debbie is she's right there by my side all the time. And she doesn't hesitate to put a knot on my head either. But it's really, in all of this means we're into this pouring out ourselves for the other. Now, how Christian is that? Still, in all of this, all the various facets of it, there is no judging. So, we're ready to sing our song.